Okay, good morning everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on reducing your carbon footprint through smart packaging design. Your speaker for today is John Garner, who is a sustainable packaging expert, but is also our Head of Sustainability, Packaging Innovation and Design here at Antalis. So just a few bits of housekeeping before we start. Please make sure your microphones are switched off. If you do have any questions throughout the session, we'd love to hear them, so please pop them in the Q&A chat and John will be answering them in the Q&A section at the end. The webinar is in two parts, so John will be going through top tips and ideas for reducing carbon footprint through smart packaging design, and then we'll have the Q&A session at the end with John. So it's the ideal opportunity for you to ask questions about any of the content from today's webinar, but also get any of your other sustainable packaging questions answered. So now I'm going to hand over to John.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased you could join us here today. As you can see, I'm speaking to you from the Smart Packaging Centre here in Colville, which is based in Leicester. Everyone's more than welcome to come and visit us. I guess the purpose of you being here today is you're probably in one of three things. You're either first of all, already on the route to change. Maybe the second part is you're considering how to change what you're doing. Or the third part might be even if you're wondering if you have to change. So hopefully the next half hour or so will help you make up your mind where you are on that journey and help you make the next step you need to go to. But first of all, we're just going to start off with a couple of quiz questions just to warm us up and to find out where we think our level of understanding is at the moment. So, as you can see on the screen, we have how much carbon does the average UK citizen add to the atmosphere every year? Is it 12 tonnes, 9 tonnes, or 6 tonnes? So please click on the screen now and we'll see what we come up with. Okay, thank you. So most of you answered, we got 51% answering 12 tonnes, 41% 9 tonnes, and 7% 6 tonnes. Well, that's interesting. The actual answer is 12 tonnes. And how's that calculated? Well, it's interesting. It's calculated by your every day-to-day activities, such as what you eat, how you heat your house, how you travel, how many planes you get on. Lots of different things make an impact on that. Second question is, without the natural greenhouse gas effect that the planet has, what would the world's average temperature be? Was it 20 degrees centigrade, 0 degrees centigrade, or minus 20 degrees centigrade? Okay, let's see what results we've got this time. So again, the largest number of people gone for is 20 degrees centigrade, which is 53%, 17% 0 degrees, and 31% minus 20 degrees. It's actually interesting because the answer to that is 0 degrees. What you have to think about is that we have many different zones on the planet. We have the Arctic and Antarctic at either end of our poles, which is very cold, and we have the equator, which is actually pretty warm around there. What is interesting on this is on the 17th, was it the 15th of July this month, which probably if you all remember was a Saturday. It was pretty dreadful here. The Earth's actual average temperature for the first time ever in a day, it's 17 degrees Celsius. 17 degrees. First time ever. So it's just a number worth thinking about as we go through this. So let's think about how we can actually design out carbon with some smart packaging solutions. First thing we need to think about actually is why do we need to design out carbon? What's the issue? Well, the issue is quite simply, we're in a time of the world where things aren't quite where we want them to be. So the next couple of slides should actually take you through where we need to be on that. So can you move on, please, Bex? Here we go. So climate change is actually a now issue. According to the January 2023 Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, we actually stand at 90 seconds to midnight, which is defined as a time of unprecedented danger. The last time that this time changed was 2020, when we're at 100 seconds. So in only 3 years, we've managed to move on 10 seconds. If we think about that, it's not going to take us long to get to those final 90 seconds before it gets very wrong. So what is happening now? Well, just this week, the World Weather Attribution said that the global warming events we are seeing in these massive heat waves and massive flood events are much more likely down to carbon change and climate change through carbon releasing. Just think about all the people who are on holiday in Greece at the moment and the wildfires that are actually curtailing their activities, and there's up to 10,000 British people there affected trying to get home. This might just have hit home to them how serious this is. In June, we had Canadian wildfires. The Canadian wildfires were so severe, they were causing a heat change and ash dropping in Norway. We also had wildfires in Yorkshire. That's pretty close to my heart. Happily, that was mainly affecting Lancashire, so it's nil win. In June, we went through day after day of the hottest June in recorded history. Recorded history, in this case, started in 1761. The Loch Ness has the lowest water levels it's ever had. So, a time of unprecedented danger. And only last month, the World Health Authority said we will not achieve our 1.5% degrees centigrade climate change target. We will not achieve it. So, don't worry, guys. It really isn't the end of the world. It's more really the end of the world as we know it. The planet will still exist. When people talk about it being the end of the world, it's not. Just think about what happened to these guys. They were wandering around for 60 odd million years. 60 odd million years. Of course, the differences between them and us is they weren't doing anything really that brought about their demise. Meanwhile, we're carrying on doing it. But let's just have a think about what we've done. We've been here before. In terms of temperature change, weather change, and our carbon footprinting, we've gone through a series of things that cause problem. Think about the ozone layer. The ozone layer was discovered in 1913, so just over a century ago. The ozone layer absorbs 97 to 99% of the sun's medium frequency UV. If we didn't have that, basically every carbon-based life form on the planet would cease to exist. All the fish that live near the surface would all cease to exist because the seas would simply be too hot to do it. Just think about what we said in the quiz question about the average Earth temperature, what it would be without our natural global warming effect. Deplete the ozone layer, we either get too hot or we get too cold. However, in 1973, we discovered, only 60 years after we discovered it was there, we found out that we were ruining it with CFCs and various other gases that we're putting out there. In 1978, the world took notice of this and we all took some action. We banned CFCs, we banned lots of polluting chemicals. Only took us 5 years to act at that point, only 5 years. And by 2016, we actually discovered there was a healing trend going on. The hole in the sky that we created, the literal hole in the sky, is now healing itself and we can fix it. But think about acid rain. Acid rain in the 1970s, terrible. We first discovered that in the 1730s. So 240 years it took us to act. It's actually mostly no longer seen as a major concern. It's still there, but it's not as serious as it was. Nowhere near as serious as it was. Smog. Smog used to be a horrendous thing, and that was caused by us basically burning carbon-based fuels. Smog, the last great smog of London was in 1952. We had an unseasonably cold time. So more coal was burnt, and can you believe that 4,000 deaths that year were directly attributable to the poor air quality? It was more likely 10 to 12,000 deaths because as people died in the next few years, they weren't really being accounted for the same thing. 1954, 2 years later, legislation came in to reduce the amount of coal being burnt in London. And now, hey, look how different London is. So let's not be dinosaurs about this, although, as I said, wasn't their fault. So the next slide here, I mean, Sadiq Khan, who is the mayor of London, he wrote a new book called Breathe. And it's just interesting, we talk about the smog in 1952 and how different London is now. So greenhouse gases are actually the largest contributor to poor global air quality. And that again is the World Health Organization stating this last year. 99% of the world suffers from poor air. Same study. So Sadiq Khan really identified 7 key things why nothing's happening. And the first one is sort of fatalism. Well, we can't do anything about it. The second one is apathy. Well, it's not really my issue. The third one is cynicism. Well, it's just governments and do-gooders. It's not real, is it? Fourth is hostility. So this is the vocal minority. People have vested interest in this. The fifth is cost. It's too expensive to do it. Maybe it's possibly too expensive not to do it. The sixth was deprioritization. It's not our main focus. COVID came along. I totally get this. But John Lennon said that life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. And if we keep pushing this backwards, this problem's going to keep getting worse and worse. And you can see right now, today, wildfires in Europe, that this is not getting better. The seventh part is actually COP. COP's a great thing. The major industries and major countries of the world get together in a room every year and talk about what they're going to do. And people think that's going to solve everything. It's not. We cannot legislate our way out of these issues. We all have to work together on it. And it's interesting, I was at the Retail Technology Show earlier on this year, and the overarching message from the major supermarket businesses there, that low carbon solutions are driving consumer buying habits and will carry more weight year on year. So people want this. Citizens want this. Consumers are great. Consumers consume. I remember the story, and it may be apocryphal, that Henry Ford said that he didn't listen to his customers or consumers, because if he asked them what they wanted, they would have asked a horse. So through technology, we can make these changes. And a great example of this now is Mars, who have just launched paper wrappers. No plastics at all in their confectionery wrappers on Mars, and plan to do more in the future. So we can do things. So enough of the doom and gloom for now. That's just to give you a background of why each of us have to make a difference in what we're doing on a day-to-day basis and how we work together as businesses to make an improvement. So sustainability through design, as far as we see it, it actually has 3 key considerations. But each element of this triptych now carries equal weight. It has to actually make it work. So technology. Yeah, changes of technology, changes of substrates, changes of different materials make a difference. Economics, can we make it so it's actually viable in terms of how much it costs and how it works? And for the first time, really, in all the conversations that I'm having increasing with customers, with local government, so environmental issues are carrying a massive weighting as part of this. And you'll see again, from what we talked about from the Retail Technology Show, is that every customer, certainly every customer of a certain age and new customers coming through, and new citizens of this planet want more sustainable solutions. And it's incumbent on us as industry to actually change it. So sustainable design, how does it work? Well, 80% of a product, any product, anything we design, whether it's this pen, whether it's the table I'm leaning on, 80% of a product's carbon footprint is actually defined at its point of design. So in terms of packaging, and this is actually a great one because it's a specific case study we've done, is that greenhouse gas emissions are broken down across different parts of its process. The raw materials are 45%. Manufacturing is 38%. The secondary packaging, we may have to wrap it, is 5%. The transport, moving it around from place to place, is 3%. And 9% is its end of life, in other words, the disposal of it. Now, if we look at this, 54% of the greenhouse gas emissions are actually in our gift. So there's a fix. Now, how does that work? Well, if we think about it, this 54% is made up of the end of life and the raw materials. We cannot change the fixed percentages, but what we can do is reduce the percentage of greenhouse gas, or the actual true value that we're making in terms of raw materials, make them lighter, make them more sustainable, make them recyclable, get them from more sustainable sources where the converting of the raw material to make paper, to make plastic, doesn't have as much greenhouse gas emissions. The percentages are fixed, but the values we're left at the end can be very, very different, and we can help with that. So, sustainable design, how does it work? It's simple. We think it's 3D. The 3Ds are DFR, design for recycling. Let's look at mono materials. Let's make it easy for people to actually do this. If you're going to use plastics, let's use plastics with some value. Plastics that have some worth on the secondary market, plastics that are worth being picked up and turned into something else. Let's get rid of the practical and technical recycling. Technical recycling is a great idea. Basically, pretty much every plastic you get, as long as it's multi-layered, that comes through to your house is probably technically recyclable. Even the multi-layer ones can be if you start going through a chemical recycling process and break them down to the constituent parts and do it all again. Yeah. Practical recycling means you can do it. It's easy. You and I don't have to make a choice. And this is where wish cycling comes in. I mean, my wife, I was going to say she hates me. That's probably a bit harsh. But it's actually because of this, not for any other reason. It's just that she will come home and we'll have something from the supermarket. And she used to say to me, is this recyclable? And I'd go, yes. So she goes to put it in the recycling bin and said, but we can't recycle it. Because there's 300 different recycling schemes across England alone from each individual local council. It's madness. It's madness. So now the question is can we recycle this here? No. And then I get, why not? I don't know. Why not? Why not? Why not just make it so easy that we don't have to make these decisions? The second D is design for disassembly. Okay, if we have to make something out of one material, let's make it really easy to take it apart. Let's not, I tell you, my nephew, I bought him a toy for his birthday just last week, and he came in a lovely box. Box was great, but it had about 9 or 10 different little plastic cable ties holding the thing in place. It was doing my head in. And because I'm an environmentalist and I do all this, I did separate them all. But it took me probably longer to separate them all than it did to unwrap the thing in the first place. So let's make this easy. And by doing that, let's reduce the amount of waste we are creating. And the third part is design for process. So let's actually consider inbound and outbound logistics and help us to reduce operational CO2 in that. Let's make it so we can get more stuff on a pallet. Every time we move a pallet, the UK average is about 16.7 kilos of CO2 we make. We can get more on a pallet, reduce it. It's dead simple. So we can reduce CO2 across all these different things, reduce waste, reduce frustration for customers and consumers, and actually make a difference. And it actually doesn't have to be that complicated. We did this 2 years ago for a major clothing retailer, and these cartons were distribution into their own stores. And they've got a high street presence and an online presence. They sell a lot of sportswear. So they're selling T-shirts and actually distributing T-shirts and hoodies to the stores. The cartons are a certain size because you get 20 T-shirts in or 12 hoodies. So the original dimension of the carton, it was 574 by 382 by I think 372 high. And that was the volume of carton that they used because they could maximize how much stuff they got in. When we went on site, we noticed there was a gap, probably nearly a meter at the top of every one of their vehicles going out because they could only get so many on a pallet. So we just changed the dimensions. It's the same volume, still holds 20 T-shirts or 12 hoodies, but then we filled the vehicle. And because we made it taller, it actually uses less material because the flaps are smaller. So we use 22% less raw material. Remember, raw material, how much it makes up, 45%. 45% of the carbon footprint of that box in the raw material. We got 24 cartons instead of 20 on the pallets, a 20% increase. Because the way the box is designed is, we got more on the pallet of the flat pack boxes going into them. So we got 280 cartons on a pallet instead of 105. So we're using almost a third less pallets. And the final delivery part of them taking their product, their T-shirts, their hoodies to their stores, We actually did 718 articulated vehicle movements instead of 958. It's a real simple change. We actually saved 48 tons of CO2 annually, just done with a design change. And the funny thing is about it as well, which was kind of accidental, it was £130,000 savings on inbound and outbound logistics. And what I haven't said here as well is because of the design of the box, because it used less raw material, it's cheaper. So it doesn't have to be complicated. So let's just circle back a little bit. We're going to the next one, please. Yeah, just remember, it doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be done. So let's just look at the 7 challenges, the 7 challenges that Sadiq Khan identified. Fatalism, we can do something about it. Apathy, look, if you don't do it, your competitors will. It's already happening. People are making these changes and driving new business and retain business and customer loyalty by doing more sustainable solutions for their customers. Cynicism, yeah, okay. Do you remember when diesel was cheap? Diesel was cheap because we all thought it was a clean fuel. So don't listen to the vocal minority, make your own decisions. Hostility, look, while you're listening to people say the negative stuff, your customers, your consumers, your children, buyers of the future, they're all already making these choices. And cost, look, I've just shown you that example. It can cost you a lot less than you think. It can actually save you money. And in terms of cost, if you don't do it, you maybe lose some business, you lose some customers, you lose some citizens who want to buy from you. Deprioritization, look, we know there's always something going to come up, always something going to come up. But when you put all the factors together, can you afford not to do it? And COP, yeah, look through the noise of that and see the benefits. Take the good stuff that's going on with it, but also make sure you're getting your own message out there and lead from the front. So I guess simple statement is in terms of how we do our packaging, how we work together, how we look for solutions, we need to evolve and get better. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So now we're just going to take some questions for John. So we've just got some popping up. Feel free, if you have any others, drop them into the Q&A chat now and we'll ask them. So the first question for you, John, is how can we find cost-effective and sustainable alternatives to plastic packaging that meet the needs of consumers and producers?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Plastic on its own isn't actually our enemy, I don't think. The problem we use with plastic is we're only using it once. There's something like enough plastic already existing on the planet to last us for 40 years. There's actually enough plastic in our oceans to last us for 16 years. So we should maybe think about how we actually reuse what we've got, because it's difficult to get. It's also really interesting how you look at the argument. It's difficult to find something that is as cheap as plastic because it's a wonderful, lightweight, versatile material. It really is. And the carbon footprint of moving plastic around, because it's so lightweight and you can get so much in a pallet, is very, very low. The simple answer is, if there is a simple answer, is we can only come and have a look. You've got to actually look at what the packaging is wanting to achieve. There are ways to take plastics out, and we have succeeded on a number of solutions, but there is no one size fits all on this. There's no silver bullet that says do this instead of that and it works. Even if we look at using bio-based plastics, where we've got the ethanol to make the plastics from renewable sources such as sugarcane and things like that. There's issues that go with that. That first of all, what are we cutting down to plant sugarcane? So we've got to think about the biodiversity and the protection of the world's resources we're doing with that. But also, I think that the misconception that people have is that if we make a plastic out of a renewable source and it gets in the ocean, it's still going to choke a dolphin. It's still, not a plastic. It's still not going to biodegrade. It's not going to break down in nature. Most of them don't. And it's quite an interesting question because I think someone quoted me, it takes 150 years for a plastic bag to degrade. I said, how do we know? We've not had them that long, so how do we actually know that? So I think for me is be responsible with it. If we have to use plastic, we have to use plastic, but let's use plastic that goes back to one of the 3 Ds. Let's make it easy. Let's use plastics that have some value, that can genuinely be recycled, and stop, whatever we make them from, let's stop making new plastics and be responsible with the ones we've got.
Okay. So we've got another question here for you, John. So how can we identify and avoid greenwashing in packaging? What are some reliable sources of information or certifications that can help us make more informed choices?
Wow, great question. It's a long question, and it's a great one. Yeah, greenwashing's fun, isn't it? I think my favourite greenwashing thing at the moment is people who are using compostable bags because they will break down in nature. They don't break down in nature, they break down in specially controlled circumstances in industrial composting facilities. I think there's 40 odd industrial composting facilities across England, and only 2 of them will handle compostable plastics. So every compostable plastic that you use in your business that goes to someone's home is going to landfill. So it's probably doing exactly what you don't want it to do. I think what you have to do is work very closely with your packaging supplier to actually calculate the true carbon footprint of the product, which we can do. We've got a number of calculators to do it. But be very careful in the statements you make and qualify them. Really think about the statements you're making, because if you get it wrong, the fines from the Competitions Authority are pretty spectacular. So I would really consider what messaging you're putting out there and really delve down substrates. The easiest thing, I guess, to use at the moment is to say you're going to use fully traceable materials. So if you're using paper, make sure it's FSC and PEFC as a minimum. That's really, really important. But also then question about, what messaging you're wanting to put out there, and look at how it's going to be disposed of at the end. Can be done, and we can definitely avoid greenwashing. I am totally against greenwashing, and as a business at Antalis, we have been very militant about what we're doing, and to the point where if you go on our website, we have this thing called the Green Star system, where we have rated all the products that we supply on an environmental basis. It's not our data, we've gone out to a third party to do it. So avoid greenwashing at all costs, but speak to some experts. We've got a few here, quite a few, and I'm happy to help with that. But yeah, just consider very much what you're doing.
Thank you. Another question for you, John. So how important do you think collaboration and knowledge sharing is between companies who might traditionally be competitors?
I think it's absolutely essential. And I've been really encouraged. I've been to a few shows in the last couple of years, and the Environmental Packaging Summit is a great one, because you just simply do not see what you used to see. And when I came into this industry 20 odd years ago, I thought it was great because everyone came to see me, and the guy who was selling me paper-based products said, "It's the most environmental thing ever because look." The plastics guy said, "It's the most environmental thing ever because look, you can reuse it over and over again." And every single person who came to see me had the same message. It was the best thing going. But they weren't sharing why. It's essential for us as suppliers, as collaborators, as clients, to share all that knowledge, and say that as far as industry is concerned now, in the packaging industry, we are generally getting our act together with this. There's still a few rogues out there who will be saying certain things they shouldn't. I think as an industry, and again, having seen it as a summit, that all the different parts of industry working together to actually make a sustainable future, I believe it's getting better, and it'll only get better. When it gets to the point where instead of having old guys like me talking about it, and we've got the next generation of buyers and professionals coming through, it's second nature, and I really welcome and encourage it.
Brilliant. Next question for you is how can we know that recycled packaging comes from deforestation-free sources? Is the new deforestation regulations going to actually increase use of new cardboard packaging?
The answer is for recycled material, how do you know it's not coming from deforestation? You don't. Simple as that. A huge percentage of our recycled material that comes into the UK is from China, it's from the Far East. So we buy so many products from there. It comes in boxes. We have no idea where that paper's come from. China used to buy a lot of recycled material off Europe. They don't do that so much anymore. So we simply don't know, which is why I guess that It's probably wrong to say using more virgin material will lead to more deforestation, because it doesn't. The FSC and PEFC schemes are all about sustainable forestry. So, for example, typically in the paper industry, if we chop down one tree, we plant up to a dozen more. So it takes a lot of trees to make a ton of paper. But what is really interesting, what's really key, is that we don't actually need to use wood. I have this dream, and it might be a dream, but I would love it if by 2030, at least 50% of our packaging papers here in the UK, and as a whole industry, aren't made from wood. We were already making products. I'm just looking around here, and we've already got some products here that are made from papers made from 50% grass. There's a really, really good business out there that are producing paper made from agricultural waste. And it's things like straw. It's the byproducts that you don't use for anything else. As more and more of us go vegan and vegetarian, we rely less and less on animal feed. So we've got so much grassland. And just for an example, just a set aside land in the UK alone, which is just basically land that we pay farmers to grow grass on and grow meadows, which is wonderful for biodiversity. There's enough grass there, if we get technology right, to probably make all of Europe's paper needs. We'd never have to cut down another tree. So yes, recycled material, you're doing the world a favour. You can't guarantee where it's come from, but again, there's a lot of PFC and FSC papers go into it. So clearly it does have a benefit, but deforestation, well, let's just stop doing it. You know, let's change the world. Let's start a movement. Let's start a movement today. I'm going to start a movement today. Let's say all of us who are on this webinar, and it's great to see you all, let's start thinking about different substrates and start shouting at people. Say, no, actually one of my fun things, which I'm kind of working on, it's in my head, is that the moment we have the 3 R's and we're talking about waste management, we have reduce, reuse, recycle. I think there should be a fourth now, and we should refuse. I'm not having that. Let's drive the change together. So, yeah, that's a long-winded answer is you don't know, but then again, it has been recycled. It's going to be recycled again, and at least it means we don't cut down a new tree. So it does have benefits. I think we got there in the end, Bex.
Yeah, I've got a couple more for you as well, John. So the next one is paper packaging tape a better alternative to PVC tape from a resource point of view?
Oh, what a great question. Yes. And no. It depends on how you look at it from its full life cycle analysis. The poly, because you're using a vinyl tape, using so little of it on material that it will be stripped out in the paper recycling process, and it will basically finish up as landfill. However, manufacturing the tape probably has a lower CO2 footprint than manufacturing the paper tape. So you've got a bit of a balance there. I would say overall, yes, the paper tape, because it's not going to be stripped out. There's some adhesive in it. The funny thing is, you can't recycle paper tape on its own, but when it's stuck to the board, you can. So at least that will get broken down, the fibres get reused. So I'd say over the course of its full life cycle, yes, but it's marginal. But again, if we're doing that, at least we are stopping releasing any more historical carbon that we've captured underground in making the plastic tape. We can make the plastic tape out of recycled material, and there is a new one that's coming out. It's actually a PET tape, which we've seen, which is made from fully recycled PET and is recycled at the point of sale again. That's an interesting product. Behaves just like vinyl. Just not sure about the cost point of that yet. But again, you know, if you drop me a note, I'll keep you informed on that.
Next question. Can plastic pallet wrap be replaced by some special paper pallet wrap effectively?
Yes, depending on what you're doing with it. We have been looking at paper pallet wrap, and it is something we will supply, but there's a whole lot of challenges with that. For a start, it's incredibly heavy. It's incredibly heavy, and because it's so heavy, you probably get 3 cycles of a pallet wrapper before you have to change the roll. So you've got a massive downtime in labour on that part. It's a very high carbon footprint in manufacturing it in terms of wrapping a single pallet. But also, I think the main thing to consider in this is probably a couple of things, is that plastic pallet wrap, by its nature, stays in an industrial loop. So we could probably go through a couple of tons a week of material that comes into us, it is always recycled. It's used again. So it's got a really low carbon footprint because it can be reused. What I would suggest, if you're looking to lower your carbon footprint of your pallet wrap, is look at the weight of material you're using. And even look at the machine you're using, because changing a machine can make it from being 120% stretch to 300% stretch. And at a stroke, you've more than half the amount of plastic you're putting out there. I think in those scenarios, the best thing to do is to test. If you're using, for example, if you're using paper pallet wrap to store something in your warehouse or to move it from one site to another within your own business in the closed loop logistics, it works. I would not want to get it wet, because then you've just got mulch, not wrap. So just maybe something to think about.
We've just got one final question coming for you, John. Keep coming in.
Right.
So do you provide the carbon data comparison between different products, e.g. virgin material versus recycled paper, which we can provide to clients to show why they should make a change?
Yes, we can do that now. And I'm also evaluating, I think, 6 different schemes, and one of which we will select this year to do some really good stuff. So yes, we can do that now. But what I really want to look at as well is that it's the what if scenario. And I want to look at the what if scenario, and I can help you with this, guys, but I want to do it so you make the what if change, but it doesn't just affect one part of it. So we've got scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. We've got the EPR coming, happily 2025 now, not 2024, little celebration. We can actually look at it saying that if you make this change here, what effect does it have there? So yes, we can calculate the difference between virgin, between recycled, between different substrates, and actually come up with a value for that. A tool I really, really like. It actually also shows the biodiversity damage, the damage to human and animal health, because you might make a switch from a plastic to a paper, but the amount of CO2 you're putting out there in manufacturing the paper, you might be stripping cadmium. There's all sorts of different things that come into it. And it also looks at deforestation as part of the procedure. So short answer, yes. Slightly longer term answer, and we're going to get better at it. But yes, otherwise, how can you make these decisions? If we can't provide some data and some arguments, and you might not get the answer you want, but at least then you can sit down and make the decision you want to make. And it might be a decision you make now, and it might be look at something going, okay, let's plan to do that in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. Just making the plan helps. It really does help. I see so many businesses, they say they're going to be carbon net zero by 2030. I go, fantastic. Where are you now? And they go, we don't know. If you can't measure it, you don't know your values, how can you possibly get to there? So yes, the raw data is absolutely essential, and we'd be delighted to help you with it.
Great. Thank you, John. And that's all of the questions for today. So we just want to say a big thank you to everyone for joining us on today's session. We hope you found it useful. We will be following up with more by sending you more information and also details of how you can get in touch with us if you do have more questions, or you need any further support on the topics shared about today, or any other sustainable packaging challenges that you may be experiencing. So again, thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.